Hi, I'm Tim Eskew.
And I'm Amanda Stradling. We are East Valley Leader Lab, and this is our podcast, Mind and Body at Work.
Wellness, well-being, and mindfulness are trending right now as organizations try to attract and retain the best talent in this tumultuous post-COVID world. At the Leader Lab, we agree these are important concepts and overdue for being fully utilized in the workplace.
We also believe that these concepts only work when you treat the mind and body as a whole. We are excited to be part of a societal shift in attention toward the whole person. We invite you to join us as we begin to look broadly and deeply at wellness, well-being, and mindfulness in the workplace.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tim Eskew. This is my partner, Amanda Stradling. We are East Valley Leader Lab, and this is our podcast, Mind and Body at Work. If the content you hear resonates with you, we hope you'll click on the link in the show notes for a description of our newest offer, the 4 Fundamentals of Well-Being. It's designed to introduce you and your team to what you can do to improve well-being in your organization. And as always, we hope you will like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. I'm excited to say we have a special guest today, Bob Dunham. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
One of the things that makes Bob special to me is he's a mentor of mine, and you'll hear more about that. Bob is the founder of the Institute for Generative Leadership, which has been a going concern since 1993. The Institute, IGL, teaches several different course formats, including intensive multi-year courses on leadership and coaching. I'm a graduate of one of those courses. I spent 5 years in it, and I can say it was one of the most interesting things I ever did and absolutely life-changing. So that's why I'm excited about having Bob here. IGL also consults with companies around the world. Bob has turned IGL into an international organization with hubs on 3 continents. And he has co-authored 2 books, The Innovator's Way with Dr. Peter Denning, and just this last year published The Power of Owning Up, which he co-authored with Samir Dua. So welcome, Bob, and I'll let Amanda get the conversation started.
Awesome. Hi.
It's great to be here with you today, Bob. Can you start just by telling us a little bit about the Institute for Generative Leadership?
Yeah. So first of all, the name Generative Leadership, this work has been going on since 1993. Actually, if I go back to how I was beginning to develop it and practice what's now called generative leadership, it goes back to 1981.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, there were leadership challenges, there were personal challenges, and by taking them on and learning, I began to learn from masters, begin to see new perspectives, and put together what's now called this discipline of generative leadership. And the Institute, we founded in 1993. We were mainly working with management teams and leadership teams in companies. And in 1998, I said, we need to expand our outreach. So we began to do some public programs. And we've had about 2,000 graduates of our multi-year programs over the years. And I've developed these relationships with affiliates in India and Latin America. And the reason people have taken this on and become affiliates that are also offering this learning is because it's a new paradigm. It's been around for a while, but it's still not widely known. So what makes generative leadership generative? First of all, I have to say the word generative is very, very popular these days about artificial intelligence. And we're not about artificial intelligence. We're about human intelligence, human bodies, human action, human results. And that's pretty much the foundation. If I had to put words to what the body of work is based on, it's based on understanding ourselves as human beings in a new way. And to do that, we need to understand the blind spots of our culture. The average person in our culture today is not very self-aware in a number of ways. We're not very self-aware that we have bodies. amazingly. Yes, we have bodies, but for most people, bodies are where you hang your clothes and try to stay healthy. But our bodies are part of the dance of life. Every conversation is a full body experience. Leadership is a full body contact sport. And so we have to reveal that dimension to ourselves to get out of our cultural blind spot. Emotions is another one. Emotions are like the place that people go to get therapy if they have problems. But our every moment experience is an emotional experience. Meaning, value, satisfaction are all emotionally based. Those happen to be the foundations of business. And so all of a sudden we're connecting important action and outcomes in the world with the internal experiences of human beings. And so generative leadership adds the dimensions of language, somatics, which is your area of specialty, emotions, and the power of learning, and the blind spots of our culture that need better interpretations than the common sense include action. Most people don't. For me, I was one. I really didn't know what the source of action was. Most people don't. They think the action is the activity, the movement. But all action comes from commitment. And those come from a history of interpretation and from conversations. So those are just some examples of how this paradigm takes us all the way down to what is a human being. And when we apply that to leadership, we begin to see with new eyes. We begin to have options that aren't available without those eyes. We also begin to see that in order to take advantage of those options, we need a body that can behave differently, listen differently, connect differently, presence ourselves differently, interact differently. And so that's what our body of work is. It's the full body contact sport. And so we talk about the leadership journey, but we also include that the leadership journey is a learning journey. And the learning journey is a life journey. And the final element I'll throw into this generative perspective of the generative human being is that leadership is not a body of technical technique. It's creating the future with others. And we include, for healthy leadership, we include creating a good life. And the good life's not a conversation that's talked about much these days. And yet people are in breakdown, suffering, not only from these other blind spots that I've mentioned, but because we actually don't have the foundation for how to integrate our work, our action in the world, with a good life externally and internally. And so we found over 4 decades, these are the issues that people face, and most of those issues come from our blind spots. So we reveal them and say, guess what? You have a body. You have choices about what you do with body reactions. And if you don't know that, you're very limited. And leadership certainly requires leadership presence, leadership connection, inspiration. And so we're all about the full body life contact sport called being human in the world of action and creating a meaningful future with others. How's that?
There's a lot there.
I'd like to share, Bob, before we move on, that I was one of those people that showed up to your classes almost 10 years ago now that was completely cut off from my body, right? I saw my body as a detriment, right? Something I wish I didn't have to bring with me to do the things that my head was doing. And you had a great term for that right off the bat. You let us know that we were heads on a stick and we needed to find our body. And that was my key blind spot. And it's been an incredible journey to get in touch with that. And it impacted me so much that now I want to share that with others. And that's why we do this, what we do at the Leader Lab.
I just want to compliment Tim, given the learning journey that he has represented as a leader, where he ran into one of these blind spots, had somebody crazy saying, hey, guess what? You're not noticing something important. He took it on and spent years of pushing himself past the edge, of learning in a place where a lot of people when we talk about the edge, it's a place where a lot of people stop. And in leadership, we need to see the edge as the portal to possibilities. And you've done that, and now you've made it your core of your life work. So I just want to acknowledge Tim's journey here in this domain.
Thank you, Bob. It was the courses you were leading at IGL that made it compelling to me. There were some things I had to overcome and some fears I had to overcome, but it was just too compelling to walk away from.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for the work you're doing.
I think it's wonderful the way that you are wording it as these blind spots can become portals as we work on this growth. That's such a neat insight right there.
Yeah.
So can you say a little more to our listeners about how a lack of awareness of our body and how we're showing up and our emotions, you mentioned that too, how our emotions can be something we sweep under the rug, kind of a blind spot as well. How can that become a portal? Where is the growth there that they might hope to see?
Well, one of the common sense understandings of our culture today is we are the way we are and we see the world the way it is. And we don't. We are the way that we are in the moment, but we are also possibilities. And many people leave those out. So my life is going to be a repetition of the past. I'm going to stay inside a certain narrow trajectory. When we go to awareness, what we've learned, and it's somatically based, body based, about awareness, is if you're not aware of something, it doesn't exist for you. And if it doesn't exist for you, you don't have any choices based on it. One of the historical stories that demonstrates that was the discovery of germs. People weren't aware of germs. And because they weren't aware of them, they had no practices around them. It wasn't part of the conversation. And so they were in behaviors that were leading to them getting sick and dying in many different ways. And the new awareness, a new story that showed up. Hey, there's germs here, and new practices, just wash your hands, and all of a sudden health outcomes were radically changed. So this awareness principle is huge when we go to leadership. The common sense about leadership today is full of blind spots, which means lack of awareness. We're not even paying attention to the right things. And these blind spots that I mentioned, if we begin to pay attention to action in a new way, of where it comes from commitment. How do we create commitment? Now you're in leadership, rather than just being in a story of movement and activity. So awareness, the principle is awareness creates choice. So the first thing we do on this journey is we get interested in what we're not aware of. We get interested in our blind spots. Just the fact that we know there are some, it begins to I can start paying attention to things in a new way. That leads us to the learning journey. We want to find people who have produced some illuminations in these blind spots that can show us new awarenesses, that give us new choices and new outcomes. When we do that, we call that becoming a new observer. You're now beginning to see your reality in new ways. You're paying attention to things in a new way. For example, when I was first being introduced to the power of language, we were doing exercises. And we were around coordinating action conversations. And so we were learning to make a request and get someone to make a promise. And so in this exercise, I made a request to my partner I was practicing with. He said yes. And my body goes all a tingle and says, that ain't a promise. He said the word yes, but I didn't get that there was a promise there. And that changed my world. I was aware that commitment was not in the words. It was in the full body expression from the speaking. And that began to reveal the world of trust. People can say yes, and you can't trust them. for example. Not that they're bad people, but they're just in a habit of, well, I don't need to be really committed here. I'm just going through the motions. So when we become aware, this creates something that wasn't there before. It creates what we call an edge. Now, if I go to my new awareness, I'm in unfamiliar territory. I'm doing something new. I'm learning, and I may not be fully comfortable with that. Here's a somatic exercise that we do in our workshops to show that. Here's what learning feels like. Take your arms and cross your arms. Go ahead and do that. You know how to do that.
Sure.
Everybody in every workshop I've had, they're easy. Now cross them the other way.
Yeah.
Is that the other way?
Exactly. It's like, It's not something that we're used to. We haven't done it that way. And it feels really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This is what learning feels like in the body. Now, when people have this, oh my gosh, this new behavior feels so uncomfortable, I don't want to do it, I'm going to go back to the old way. And what they've done is they've just limited their future to be a repetition of the past. But if we're aware that that is a symptom that you're in new territory, we can hang out there a little bit. We can be curious and rather than reactive. And in our leadership work, we found that understanding what is needed to be a leader is not really the problem. Most people don't know how to learn in a new behavior. They try to take what leadership calls you to do, stick it in the old body, and the old body doesn't do it very well. And then they say, well, the framework doesn't work. When it's actually, we haven't developed a new body. That's why in our work, we say leadership is a performance art. And it's just like learning to be a professional and a physician or a chef or a tennis player. You got to do it through practice, not through concepts. And you have to be engaged enough to want to go through those moments of discomfort so that you can begin playing and learning in the new. So to make it a portal is to first of all have the story that the point of discomfort, the edge, the place where I get stuck, could be a doorway to new possibilities and to get curious.
Good curiosity.
Exactly.
Great. I love the way you describe the leadership journey and this transformation. I would love to hear a little bit more about your leadership journey and why this work resonates so much with you personally, because it's obvious that you're embodying these things that you're talking about. Can we hear a little bit about how you've got here?
Oh, yeah, my story. I got a couple of key themes in my early story. One was that I told my dad when I went to college, hey, I want to study history and philosophy. And my dad said, are you kidding? You're crazy. You're going to become an engineer.
Oh.
And I got a degree in engineering. But that produced a certain tension in my life of I was lucky. I ran into computers. They were fascinating, so I had fun. But there was something that I had decided was important to me that was not being served, that hung around. And so there was that tension going on. And then being an engineer, I was in Silicon Valley, and I was head of the onboard software team for the Hubble Space Telescope for 4 years. Did some fascinating work as an engineer. Yeah, an amazing. What was amazing about being in that role is we were processing through the computer the data of all the other systems. So I got to know the whole vehicle and how it worked. Loved the experience. I wound up going to another Silicon Valley company to be part of a team that was going to invent a new computer. I was all excited about that too. And they canceled the project. The company wasn't doing well, so they said, oh, we can't invest in this wild-ass project. And I was thrown into a company in breakdown. And and the mood was bad. People were quitting at a high rate. Hadn't gotten the product out the door for 2.5 years. That's pretty much a death sentence in Silicon Valley. And I hung out for a while and saying, how come we're not putting our energy into excellence? Why are, the complaints and the bad moods and so I decided to leave. They had a new executive come in, and he did an exit interview and said, why don't you stay and help me turn this organization around? And I decided to stay. And I didn't know what the hell I was going to do, but he made me a program manager. So there I am, responsible for all the software engineers, 250 engineers, getting product out the door in an organization that had not functioned before. And I'd never done it before. So I had these two issues that were in my life. One was, what's my life? And am I ever going to grab a hold of it? And the second was, from doing some outstanding engineering, I was in the middle of the problem of people. I was in the middle of the problem of leadership. I was in the middle of the problem of how do I get an organization to function? And I began looking for different answers. I wound up, oddly enough, in a workshop about communication. And they revealed, that was my first experience of a blind spot. They asked me the question, what is action? And I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to pass the quiz, but I could make up a good answer. And but at that moment, I realized everybody in the room had a similar reaction. I said, oh my God, we don't even know what action is. And no wonder my company's screwed up if we don't know what action is. And they proceeded to give me an illumination of a blind spot, a new paradigm, and said, all action comes from commitment. All commitment is shaped in conversation. I didn't know that. I'd never heard that before. I went back to work, and in 6 months, we delivered all 35 products of the company on time, on budget, 10 times higher quality than had ever been achieved before, because that principle worked. So I had two results of that. I had this incredible gift of seeing the world with my blind spot illuminated and having new awareness, new choices, and new behaviors. And I found I fell in love with the dimension of people. And that's what led me to leadership and finally founding the Institute for Generative Leadership to share from that experience and from continued learning that we continue to do, unfolding these questions of what is action, what is a team, what is leadership, how do you make it available as actions, behaviors that actually work, and do it as part of a good life, which means a good life for you, a good life for your customers, a good life for your team. Because the enemy in our discovery, the enemy out there of good leadership is the metaphor of the machine. Most organizations and most of the common sense of our culture today treats people like machines. Oh, we're in action now? Then I gotta go into production mode. I gotta do more. I gotta crank. And where's the people? Where's the conversation? Where's this body and emotion that is part of our life? And so we need to reconstitute action itself and leadership on human beings doing what they do, which is to create a shared future and make it happen, or they don't, and they suffer.
And Bob, there's another element to your breakout of action, your anatomy of action, that you haven't mentioned yet. And it was actually the element 10 years ago when I met one of your disciples. He had come to a presentation I was making on commitment, and proceeded to tell me about this guy that's saying that the reason, where do these commitments come from? They come from our care. They come from what really matters to us in the world. And, I hadn't heard it. I hadn't heard that connection made in the past. I mean, yes, we talk about purpose, but there wasn't a good explanation of how do we go from what we think is important to actually making commitments that result in trustworthy action. So
Exactly.
say a little bit about where the care piece came in.
Well, there's some philosophers who talk about care, and that brought up the topic. But when I began to explore where does commitment come from, where does the energy for it come from, and applied this notion of care, if something matters, you take ownership. If something matters, you pay attention. If something matters, you bring yourself in a whole different way. And if all that matters is I'm here to attend and collect a paycheck, and the actual work doesn't matter, you get a totally different result. And not only did this turn out to be fundamental to action, we have to care about our actions. We need to care about the consequence for the action, or we don't move in very powerful ways with it. But there's something even deeper about care, which is that when we're looking at living our life as part of leadership and work and being a professional and caring about the actions, the question of the big questions in life are ones that have no right answer. You can't find anyone else who's going to give you the answer of who you are, or what a good life is for you, or why you're here and where are you going to go now. There's no right answer. All those questions produce, I call them existential questions. All they produce is choices. And so how do you deal with all these freaking choices if you become aware of them? Most people live lives without choice, by the way. Most people are on the treadmill. Most people are in, tomorrow's going to look like yesterday, and I hope I can survive it. And when we begin to see, no, the future is a choice. And how do I choose? What commitments am I going to make for myself? What commitments am I going to make for my career? What commitments am I going to make to my customers? What commitments am I going to share with my team? These are what matters. And the care has two qualities. One is when you go to the big question, what's going to make my life worth living? What's going to make my life mine? And what's going to make my life a good life? So when I get to the end of it, I'll say, I'm satisfied. That was a good life. That only happens if you discover what you care about and you take care of it. Any other path is some kind of sacrifice, some kind of coping. And there's versions of that. So we discovered that, and as you found in your own journey, we put the question that's crucial for your leadership, your learning, and your life. What do you care about, really, most deeply? And most people don't have an answer to that when we first ask it, because our culture doesn't support the question. It's all about get busy and produce, damn it, rather than what really matters to you in a deep way. So discovery of our deepest care is what gives us a GPS to meaning. You can't have value if you don't care. You can't have satisfaction if you don't care. And how many people are playing games and living lives where they sacrifice their care? Well, that's just personal. I got to pay my mortgage and satisfy my customers and, please other people. And that's missing. So when we see that, and we see that value is the foundation of action, value, satisfaction, and meaning, and it is a source of aliveness, that gives us this new awareness. Well, why can't we have our work include that? Why does work have to be sacrificed? And so in my Silicon Valley story, that happened for me not by changing my career, but by simply noticing I wanted to take care of the human dimension of my organization. It wasn't all about getting the computers out the door. It was about producing an excellence, pride, and satisfaction in our work. And then the computers were the side effect. And that's what I found in my journey. And so we support everybody in this deep internal exploration. And we've said something very important here in our discovery in this generative learning, that action comes from commitment, and the level of energy and meaning in that commitment comes from your care. Both commitment and care are internal states of human beings. But because of our cultural blind spots, we think action is all external. It's all the doing. And we don't pay attention to where it comes from and what gives it power and meaning. And so part of leadership and part of life is to find our care, to choose our commitments, and the journey evolves. Those things change over time. But then you're in the role of creating your life and your contribution, not simply coping with your situation.
Yep. And taking care, I think, is closely related to an area of focus that we've targeted in this season of our podcast, which is well-being. I want to shift to that in a moment. But before we do that, I wanted you to please describe. So, I've talked a little bit about the impact that the Institute has had on me and your courses have had on me. And, there were 60 people in the cohort that I was in going through it together, and I saw not the exact same blind spots and the exact same transformations, but I saw many different variations of it, of individuals. But tell us about the organizational impact. Talk about one of the organizations that's really committed to this discourse and how it's changed them, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, there's many organizations that have flipped themselves through this approach. One of our leading practitioners as a CEO of a company is Herb Johnson. He's the founder of an engineering company in Houston, Texas, and called HVJ Associates. And he has, over the last 10 years, he's tripled his revenue. He sent all of his managers and executives through the program. And by using the framework, the generative framework, he took on one of the books you mentioned that we wrote, The Innovator's Way, and he studied that intensely through his course and after. And we worked with him for a while on that. And he innovated. He actually produced a franchise model for his company that is unique in engineering services. And part of his commitment was, I want to produce millionaires. I want to spin off CEOs of their own business units using all the learning that has been produced in my company. And he's done that. He has three spin-offs so far. And so that's an example of not just being a good student or not just elevating leadership, but taking it as a literally it's fundamental to their company culture. They say that, and an indispensable part of how they have grown their company and how they treat each other, grow their leaders in the company, and making an impact on a growing number of families.
Yeah, I remember meeting Herb at the program, and several of the people that were coming through when I was in the program. Some of them became franchise owners while they were going through the program, and you could see the passion and the excitement. They were being given a chance to not just be a millionaire, but to put their stamp on what they liked about their field, what they cared about.
Exactly.
One thing that stands out to me is this transformation. It doesn't always have to take you to a whole different path, right? Sometimes it just breathes new life and energy and passion into the career that you're on.
Absolutely.
And it becomes kind of a whole new path, even though it was the same one you started on. It just feels more alive. And it becomes more
Absolutely.
successful.
Yeah, in many ways. This one of the ways we've learned to think about that is that the power of this shift, this transformation, if you will, of becoming a new observer and actor in your life, it's not about the content. It's about the context. So when you shift your context in how you're holding yourself and your offers in the world, and what work is, and what leadership is, and how you contribute, you may find that what the work you're doing and the place you are is fine, but everything's different because you've shifted the context. Other people, when they do the exploration and say, this body of work doesn't really connect to my care or make me alive, they do shift careers, but that's certainly not necessary. I think if we looked, I think the majority of people tend to be on simply elevating where they are to become more meaningful, more valuable, and more impactful.
That's fantastic.
So one of the things we've been doing throughout this season, Bob, is identifying people that have a unique perspective on well-being. May not be their main focus, but we know that they'll bring a unique perspective. And can you tell us from the generative perspective, how do you think about well-being in the workplace, well-being in life? What's the connection there?
I think you've mentioned it as the good life a few times so far. What does that look like?
Exactly. So well-being, I know for myself earlier in my career, well-being tended to be a subject that was a lot about health. You know, you're healthy, you're physically healthy, you're emotionally healthy.
Your wellness, yeah.
And that's fine. We include that. But in the generative context, your healthiness is also in the domain of meaning. And that takes us to this conversation about what do you really care about? And are you connected to that? Are you taking care of what you really care about? And so it's also always in the context of a journey. We're on a life journey. We're changing. You can't predict who you're going to be 3 to 5 years from now, but you can envision it and be in the meaningful project of becoming that. So well-being, in if I use the good life framework, is rooted in first of all, if you don't know what you care about, you can do lots of good stuff to be healthy and still be wondering, what the hell am I doing with my life? You know, where am I going here? And so we include that dimension of your life journey, of what's most deeply meaningful and matters to you, that will produce aliveness and satisfaction and value. And we find when people stay with those questions, they find their answers. And it's unique to every person. There's one aspect to this, because sometimes people get a little distracted with, oh, I'm going to get fabulously rich and I'm going to do this and that. And we invite them to do two things. One is that truly what's meaningful for you? Is it just an exciting and energizing challenge? I mentioned before, if you get to the end of your life and you are fabulously rich, but you also happen to get divorced 5 times and have drug addiction problem, which is not uncommon for people who get captured by the external success only, then we can have a better design framework for what's truly meaningful. This second question we have that helps us both as leaders and as a community is to apply the standard that is a standard for the responsibility of leadership. To be a leader is to accumulate power. They go together. If you're a leader and people follow you, you have power. Then one of our learnings is, if you're a leader, you need to be responsible for the consequences of power. Some people use power and produce negative consequences in the world. And we don't think that meets the standard of a good life for yourself and others. So our standard, our ethical standard for leadership is we're committed to create a world in which everyone thrives. It's not a zero-sum game to get more and take it away from others. It's to acknowledge that together we can create, together we can move with more power. And if we put the time and heartfulness into the conversation, what do we really care about for the future and the world and our children and our children's children, I think we'll come up with meaningful commitments and be able to make that happen. And that's different than simply doing a good job and getting good numbers for your company. We think the responsibility of leadership is bigger than that for yourself and for the impact you have in the world.
Yeah, I'm hearing a distinction from some of our other conversations about well-being. There tends to be a sense of the leadership needs to, what can the leadership do to improve the well-being of the employees, of the team?
Yeah.
And, I've recognized this before, but you're bringing it out. It's really a fundamental question it's universal. It's not just about how we're going to help them with their well-being. It's about each of us as individuals. What is our meaning in life? How are we going to bring about and take care of our own well-being? Is that
absolutely? Well, so one of our discoveries over the years has been people tend to have perspectives and conversations in three dimensions. The world space. Oh, we're going to get better numbers, so let's all sacrifice and get the numbers. But you can only have impact in the world as a leader if you are creating coordinated action in a team or an organization or a community. And that takes us to what we call the we space. But you can't have a healthy we space if the games are sacrifice, draining, domination, and all styles that can produce negative outcomes for members of the community. And so the we space is based on what we call the me space. And they're all going on in parallel all the time. So one of the things we notice is when people speak about results, they often tend to just focus on one of those dimensions. And we need to connect all three. So the learning we do with this awareness of care and commitment and the power of conversation to create and to coordinate and to have us create shared futures, shared care and shared commitments and shared standards and practice, which is essential, by the way. You don't have a team without them. Then this becomes very pragmatic, and we begin to see that how I work in the me space affects my impact in the we space as a leader and the outcomes in the world. They're not separate. We need all of it. So if we're going to produce an organization of well-being, then we not only need healthy people, we need healthy conversation. We need healthy connection. We need healthy listening, respectful listening, meaningful listening. And that happens because we recognize every human being is not a human resource, a unit of production. They're a human being that can contribute in shared care and commitment to create a future together. And when that becomes the context for our conversations, then we include honest negotiations, honest promises, not just dictating you are now going to drain yourself into this objective. When I did the turnaround in Silicon Valley, I found that we had to say no in order to have yeses you could believe, because people were used to overcommitting. But when we owned the yeses, we produced results, and the results were way beyond what had been achieved before because we had ownership. We had real commitment. And that came from a certain quality of conversation. So when we go there, the organization is built. It's a network. It's a network of people sharing the future, sharing lives, sharing conversations, and they're sharing commitments and coordinating around them. That's what gives them the power to produce the result. And if we do that to an ethic of respectful listening, making trustworthy promises. Dealing with breakdowns is part of the process, not as a trigger for blame. And that everybody has a chance to grow as part of the process. Then you begin to see better results. You begin to see people growing and a culture that people are proud to be part of.
Nice.
That's wonderful. Can we highlight just a little bit more, since this is an important part at the Leader Lab, the body's role in this well-being and these connections and conversations that we're having? Just really hone in on why our body matters.
Yeah, great. So the body is always there. Even though we forget it sometimes, I've never met anyone who had an experience without their body. Even when they've floated off into the universe, there's still a body. So the body's always there, and it's not simply a platform to carry our head around, which is what was mentioned before. Our experiences are full body experiences. Our emotions live in our body. Our body has reactions. We open and close with the full body. A conversation is a full body experience, and in the performance art of life. So by leaving it out, we've kind of had a culture saying, well, your work is all in your head, so just do head stuff. And when you meet people, it's head-to-head communication, and hopefully that goes well. But it's not. It's a process of listening. It's a process of connecting. It's a process of producing something shared as an agreement, as an understanding, as something we care about together. And so body lack of awareness is a blind spot in our culture because we haven't included it in all dimensions of action. And we tend to have separated. Well, athletes, they worry about their body. Yeah, that's okay.
Sure.
Physicians, they have to deal with your body because they're sick or surgery or whatever. But we not only speak of body in our leadership as a foundation of action, but we use the word somatics, which means mind and body together, because they're really not separate. You see, separating the mind and from everything else was a philosophical move in the 1600s that we've been suffering with ever since. And it's not separate. The mind changes, the body feels it. The body changes, the mind has a reaction. So if we go to somatics and we begin to understand every moment is an embodied moment. Everything we see comes from our embodiment for seeing and discerning. Everything we think is embodied. Everything we feel is embodied. Everything we do is embodied. Like, how can we leave the body out? And by doing that, we wind up with a lot of issues of disconnection, bad moods, suffering. And so
I think burnout that comes in our culture a lot comes from often a disconnect with our bodies. If we had been tuned in and listening, then we probably wouldn't be in states of burnout. So I think that's another symptom that we suffer with in our society.
I agree. And so, we've really focused on this power of conversation, but the conversation is not just words. It's also a conversation with your body. Are you listening to your body? What's your body saying to you? It usually has good advice, and as well as your spirit. Spirit is an experience, and we can feel it, and we can include it when we have the awareness to be open to it. So if you look at any professional performing at a high level, professional sports is easy to think of bodies, but how about a CEO of a large company? They have produced a body to play that game, and I mentioned a physician, a chef, an accountant. All require a certain kind of embodiment, and so if we include it, awareness creates choice, we can get better at it. And one of the blind spots of our culture, one of the issues of our culture, is the predominance of the machine metaphor. Now that I have to take action, I'm going to turn myself into machine mode. And that leads to another huge cultural issue and life issue, which is the habit of sacrificing. I'm going to sacrifice to perform well. I'm going to sacrifice to deal with the breakdown. So many leaders burn out. So many professionals burn out. And the enemy is more. And the problem with more is when you do more, then the story of more doesn't go away. Okay, I'm doing more, but now you get more. You know what happens when you're successful? When you do more, you get more demand. And so if the answer is, well, I'm going to go to more again, you wind up sacrificing, and I've gone through physical burnout in my career twice. I'm a PhD in the issues of burnout and more, and learned, no, you've got to know what is enough. And what is enough to what standard to be excellent, to have a good life. The way we have an acronym I've invented that helps us understand ourselves as human beings in action. It's called yourself. We talk about ourself, SELF, or ourselves as, okay, what's a self? What's yourself, myself, what ourself? But we've used the acronym SELPH to have a different view of what a self is. What is the S? Somatics.
Your mind, body.
Exactly. The E is emotions. The L is language. The P is practice. And the H is history. So in every moment, we're a unity of SEL, somatics, emotions, and language going on. We are the product of the history of our practice to become that. And if we change our practices, instead of being dictated by our history, we become history makers. If we want to learn, we have to change our practices to embody a new way to observe and act in both our internal states, our internal conversations, and our internal feelings, as well as our external actions.
I'm getting mindful of the time here. We're getting toward the end of our time, but we've got at least one more meaty question, maybe even a two-parter. I'm curious, you've extended your work life beyond what a lot of people do in terms of how long you've been working in your career. How do you take care of your well-being to be able to continue with the passion that you bring every day, every course?
Well, thank you. A couple of things. One is I'm going to go back to the source of well-being, not just being physical, but meaning. And what gives my life meaning is my work. I don't do my work because I need to. Work is not sacrifice. I resolved that issue back in my 30s. I don't do work. I don't sacrifice to do my work. I'm doing work that feeds me, that gives me meaning. So I'm not going to stop working. Why would I do that? I'm taking care of what I care about. So that gives me energy. That gives me meaning. That gives me the thrust of going forward into being alive and feeling alive and having meaning. As I do that, I'm this year I'm turning 77, and I think I am more ambitious, more ready to learn, and have more ambition to contribute than I ever have before in my life. And I've been feeling that over the years. I feel my longer years have given me more to contribute, and I'm excited, really excited about what I'm about now, and the conversations I'm in, and what I'm creating. And how do I take care of my well-being in that? Certainly I take care of my body. I pay attention to my sleep. I pay attention to what I put in my body and eat. I rest during the day if I feel I need to. And probably what's most important is I pay attention to the conversations that I'm in. I don't let worry hang around too much. Worry is just an alert that there's a concern that has to be taken care of. I don't get into negative conversations. I deal with what I need to deal with and get back to what's meaningful. And I do walk. I might even start doing push-ups again. I'm thinking about that. But I'm living the good life. I'm clear about what I care about. I'm taking care of it. I also I happen to be at a lot of edges of new challenges that I'm curious about, that I'm excited by. I've never bought into the story of retirement because work for me was not sacrifice. And retirement, if you look it up in the dictionary, it also means going to sleep. I don't want to retire. I'm not going to sleep. And so I'm just super pleased that I am at an age where I can choose what I do, and this is what I choose, and it brings me life.
That's an inspiration to me, Bob, and I think it will be to a lot of our listeners.
Beautiful.
When they think about how they want to spend, the rest of their life, the next 10 years of their life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Go for it.
That's great. Do you have any last thoughts, that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I'd share this. One is that the future is now. If you ask someone about the future, what they will tell you is a story. The future is a story. There's no place to go to find the future. It's now. And so we want to pay attention to what future we're living into. And since it's a story, we can be the author rather than the victim. If we're in a story like the future's not so good and it's not open, we need to find our authorship and say, no, I want my future to be something I care about, a place of learning, of creating, because we do create the future and action and outcome. So given that that is a powerful perspective, we can create a future that's calling us to our meaning, calling us to our well-being, calling us to our delight in life. And we were born for something, in my opinion. We were born to be us. How do we be us in our best way of being fully alive and being an example and bringing that aliveness to others? And so the way, as you recall, Tim, that we end all of our learning events is with the following declaration. Go out and create the future because you are anyway. Go for it.
Yeah, I do remember.
Beautiful.
That's fantastic, Bob.
Very
All
good.
right. I think we're going to close up now.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for bringing your special, unique energy and your whole framework and view of life. It's been a real honor.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks. It's been my pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Bob.
Great.
Okay.
You want to...
Outro?
Sure.
Thank you so much to our listeners for being here. This has been Mind and Body at Work with the East Valley Leader Lab. If you feel inclined, please click on our show notes for the description of our newest offering, the 4 Fundamentals of Well-Being. This is designed to introduce you and your team to what you can do to improve your well-being within your organization. And as always, if this content resonated with you and your cares, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and also on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and be well and keep moving.